Mr
Deputy Speaker, I'd like to remind the House of my declaration of interest that I do provide some advice on global economies and investments to an industrial company and an investment company. Madam Deputy Speaker, I greatly welcome this budget because I think it is right that we need to do more to help the promotion of exports, of industrial investment, of the rebalancing of our economy, and of continuing the long process of getting the deficit under control. In our exchanges already, I've highlighted the fact that debt interest will be higher than the education programme next year, despite the best endeavours of the government, and that unless we carry on to make good and rapid progress to get the deficit down and eliminated, that debt burden will build up, and future governments, whoever they may be, will find they're spending more and more money on debt interest and have less and less for the public services that our electorates expect us to provide. And I would like to clear up, I think, a common misunderstanding about how this is being done, which I think has occurred because of the use of jargon and economist language in describing the process. And it has been described as a process where 80% of the reduction is done by spending cuts and 20% is done by tax rises. And that is true if the programme is successfully completed by 2018 and if you measure it as a percentage of GDP at that point. But that isn't how most people think about how you curb an excessive deficit. If you've got a large deficit of your own in your accounts, you either have to find a way of earning more money or you have to make immediate cuts in the amount of cash you are spending. And I think a lot of people outside this House think that 80% by spending cuts meant that because we started with a £160 billion deficit, the inherited deficit, there was £132 billion of actual cash cuts in public spending. Well, of course there isn't, and I'm very glad there isn't, because that would have done huge damage to important public services. What the government has decided to do is to limit the rate of increase in public spending and to promote a more active economy so that tax revenues eventually catch up, and we are on that long process. The first 3 years saw very little growth in the economy, and so it delayed the reduction in the deficit because we didn't get the surge in tax revenues we were hoping for. Now it looks as if there's better news with faster growth coming through, and so the process can be completed, assuming the economy still recovers. In terms of public spending, I had thought that perhaps we might cut it in real terms in the first 2 or 3 years, but it now appears from the latest figures that there was actually a small real increase in public spending in the first 3 years. Current public spending went up by more than inflation. And if you look at the impact on the economy as a whole, it gives the lie to all those who suggest that too much was cut too soon and that reduced output and was the cause of the delay in growth. Because actually, if you look at the attribution of growth and decline in activity and incomes, the public sector made a small positive contribution to the economy in every one of the first 3 years of the coalition government. So I hope that reassures some of those opposite who felt that there was too much being cut and damage was being done. The good news is it wasn't. There will have to be some reductions in some programmes in the years ahead in order to hit the targets, because although public spending will continue to rise in cash terms, there will need to be a little bit of a real reduction in the next Parliament. And because some of the programmes need to go up quite a lot, debt interest will go up quite a bit anyway, we will have to make reductions on other programmes, whoever is in office.
Yes, I think my honourable friend's making, right honourable friend's making an excellent point, and notwithstanding the austerity that he is talking about, and notwithstanding the fact that there were over 500,000 jobs lost in the public sector, what is particularly remarkable about these tough times, would he not agree, was that 1.7 million jobs were created in the private sector.
Yes, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's been magnificent news, and it shows that the private sector is remarkably resilient despite all that's been thrown at it. And that is the reason why we can now look forward to both better living standards and a better public sector, because we need all those people to be in work, to pay more tax in order to pay for those public services that are much wanted by our constituents and in this House. But I'd also like to deal with the argument from the party opposite that I thought was put in a very exaggerated form by the Labour leader in his response to the budget, in a rather partisan appearance, which was out of sympathy with his new style at Prime Minister's questions. But I'm not one to condemn partisan debate. I think sometimes it livens the place up. But it was a very partisan speech by the Leader of the Opposition. And his rant, as my honourable friend says, just had one basic message, was that wrongly believing that the Conservatives want to have tax cuts for the rich and misery for everybody else. What we want is tax cuts for everyone, Madam Deputy Speaker. And what this budget and the budget before it offers is tax cuts for everyone. And I'll tell you how we have different types of tax cut for people at different levels of income. For those on the lowest incomes, we take them out of tax altogether, so they get a genuine tax cut. They go from paying something to paying no income tax at all, and I think the House is united on the wisdom of that. At the top end, we cut the rate. And so what happens is that the rich and successful people actually pay more tax, not less tax. And that seems to me to be magic, because then everybody is happy, or they should be. Only the very jealous then should be miserable, because what we've got is the rich staying here, investing here, creating jobs here, creating more money here, and paying more tax because the rate is lower. What is there not to like about that proposition? And what is odd about it is that the Labour Party in office until the last couple of days knew that and kept the top rate of tax below the level that we inherited and below the level we have now fixed. And so it is a bit rich that Labour is now complaining that we are light on the rich when our tax rates are collecting a lot more tax from the rich, they are higher than the tax rates they impose, and when we could actually collect even more tax from the rich if we brought those tax rates down a bit more, which I hope come a Conservative government we might be able to do. Because surely what we want is to maximise the revenue from people, not to make a political point and drive them abroad so that we have a society with less money and less jobs and less creativity. I'm very pleased that the Chancellor made some moves on energy. I do think we want an industrial recovery. I think we need a much bigger and stronger one than we've generated so far. The first thing you need to do to have strong industrial recovery in this country is to ignore the advice of the Green MP and to go for cheap energy. America is going for cheap energy. America is reindustrializing very quickly. America is now super competitive against companies in the European Union. We've heard recently from a leading chemical major in Germany that they're going to put more of their investment abroad, outside the EU altogether, because the energy prices are simply uncompetitive and the gas feedstock is uncompetitive. We need to find that gas and get that gas out as quickly as possible, because we need to match the United States shale revolution if we wish to save our high energy using industries and if we wish to reindustrialize and give some hope to particularly the northern cities with their long tradition of industrial activity, because they need much cheaper energy. We need to do more for savers, and I'm delighted by a very elaborate and interesting set of measures from the Chancellor on saving. Savers have had a miserable time after the collapse. It was rightly successive governments and successive governors of the Bank of England have had to keep interest rates on the floor to try and stimulate some activity and prevent a worse collapse than we were experiencing in 2008 at the height of the crisis. And that has been very bad news for savers. The tax changes will be helpful to savers, and the pensioner bond offer, if the rates are around the level we're now looking at, makes sense, and that would be a bit more attractive and something for pensioner savers to look forward to. I also welcome more flexibility for pensioners generally. Annuities are not good news at the moment, and if people can put that off or have a better choice, that may well be an excellent answer. So yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget needs to be good for savers, needs to be good for industry, needs to be good for exports. We are going in the right direction. It will help promote a bit more growth, and only if we get a lot of growth will we get out of this debt bind.